8-year-old Ethan Carter wasn't supposed to understand what he heard that afternoon at Gate 22. But the moment he did, he made a decision that would stop a powerful man from boarding a doomed flight and quietly unravel a deadly plan no one else even knew existed. The airport buzzed with the usual chaos of delayed departures, impatient travelers, and overhead announcements echoing off polished floors. But Ethan sat still in his seat, swinging his legs absent-mindedly, as he focused on something no one else seemed to notice. His mother sat beside him, scrolling through her phone with the tired detachment of someone who had been traveling too long, occasionally reminding him to stay close, to sit still, to stop staring. But Ethan couldn't stop. The cockpit door of the aircraft parked at their gate was slightly open, just enough for voices to slip through, and among the routine chatter and technical exchanges, something different caught his ear. The language. It wasn't English. It wasn't something most people around him would recognize, but Ethan did, just barely. His grandfather had taught him bits of it over the years, simple phrases turned into games, little lessons wrapped in stories. French. He didn't understand everything, not even close, but what he heard next didn't need perfect translation to feel wrong. Le système n'est pas stable, a voice muttered from inside. Ethan leaned forward, his small body tensing as he tried to listen harder. Si on décolle, on any revient pas. His stomach dropped. He didn't know every word, but he knew enough. System, not stable. If we take off, we don't come back. His heart began to pound in his chest, fast and uneven. The kind of fear that didn't come from imagination, but from something deeper, something instinctive. He looked around quickly, expecting someone else to react, to stand up, to question it, but no one did. Passengers lined up casually as boarding was announced, flight attendants smiled with rehearsed calm, and the world continued moving like nothing was wrong. Because no one else understood. No one else had heard what he had just heard. His eyes moved across the crowd, searching for something, someone, he didn't even know what, until they landed on a man standing a few rows ahead in the boarding line. There was nothing obvious about him at first glance, just another well-dressed traveler in a dark, perfectly tailored suit, but the longer Ethan looked, the more he felt it. The stillness, the control. People around the man seemed to shift subtly, unconsciously giving him space without knowing why. 2 other men stood nearby, not too close, not too far, their attention disguised but constant. Ethan didn't know who the man was, didn't understand the world he came from, but something in him recognized importance when he saw it. And more than that, he felt urgency. The line began to move. The man stepped forward, boarding pass in hand, calm and composed as if nothing in the world could touch him. Ethan's chest tightened. If he said nothing, if he just stayed quiet like his mother always told him to, that man would walk onto that plane. And if what he heard was true, he wouldn't walk off. Before he could think it through, before fear or doubt could stop him, Ethan jumped out of his seat and ran. "Sir, wait." His voice cut through the noise just enough to make a few heads turn, but it was the man who reacted instantly. He stopped mid-step and turned around slowly, his eyes landing on Ethan with sharp precision. Not annoyed, not confused. Alert, always alert. Ethan slowed as he approached, suddenly aware of how small he was, how ridiculous he might sound, but it didn't matter anymore. His mother's voice called out behind him, apologetic and embarrassed, already trying to pull him back, but the man raised a hand slightly, stopping her without even looking at her. His attention never left Ethan. "Why shouldn't I get on that plane?" the man asked quietly. His voice was calm, controlled, but there was something underneath it, something that told Ethan this wasn't a man used to being questioned. Ethan swallowed hard, his throat dry, his heart still racing. He stepped closer, lowering his voice like it was a secret too dangerous to say out loud. "The pilot." He was talking, Ethan whispered. In French. Something flickered in the man's eyes. Not surprise, recognition. "And?" he asked. Ethan hesitated for just a second, then forced the words out. He said the system isn't stable, and if the plane takes off, it won't come back. Silence followed. Not the loud kind, but the heavy kind. The kind that settles in the space between people when something important has just been said. Behind the man, one of the suited figures shifted slightly, his posture tightening. The other subtly glanced toward the aircraft. The world around them kept moving. Boarding continued, announcements played, People walked past without a second glance, but in that moment, everything felt paused. The man studied Ethan's face carefully, searching for something. Fear, confusion, lies. But what he found instead was certainty. Pure, unfiltered certainty. And that was what made the difference. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the man exhaled. He turned his head slightly toward one of his men and spoke in a voice so calm it almost didn't register as urgent. "Stop boarding," he said. No raised voice. No panic. Just a decision. And decisions, when made by men like him, carried weight. The man then looked back at Ethan, something new in his expression now. Not softness, not quite, but something closer to respect. "What's your name?" he asked. "Ethan," he replied quietly. The man nodded once, as if committing it to memory. Around them, confusion began to ripple through the gate as airline staff received conflicting instructions, voices rising slightly, procedures being questioned. But the man didn't look at any of it. He was still looking at Ethan. Because in a place full of noise, distraction, and routine, an 8-year-old boy had heard something no one else had, and had chosen to speak. And without realizing it, Ethan Carter had just stopped a man from walking onto a flight that was never meant to land. The plane took off without him, and for a while, nothing seemed wrong. Passengers boarded, engines roared, and Flight 908 disappeared into the sky like any other routine departure. Back in the terminal, the brief tension at Gate 22 began to fade for everyone except two people. Ethan, who sat quietly beside his mother, replaying the pilot's words in his mind, and the man in the dark suit, who stood watching the departure screen with the stillness of someone waiting for confirmation rather than reassurance. He hadn't questioned Ethan again. He hadn't brushed it off. He had simply listened and chosen not to board. His associates lingered nearby now, no longer pretending to be casual travelers. Their posture had changed, their attention sharper, scanning everything. Because if the boy was right, then this wasn't just a strange moment. It was something else entirely. At 4:29 p.m., the first crack appeared. The flight status froze on the screen. No altitude update. No tracking movement. Just a silent pause in the system that shouldn't have happened. Staff members began exchanging quick looks. Phones came out. One call turned into 3, then 5. The calm, rehearsed rhythm of the airport started to fracture. Within minutes, the word spread, not through announcements, but through tension. Flight 908 had lost contact. No distress call, no warning, just gone. The energy in the terminal shifted instantly. Conversations dropped. People gathered near screens. Some tried calling loved ones on board. Others stood frozen, trying to process what lost contact really meant. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He didn't feel proud. He didn't feel brave. He just felt cold, because now the words he had heard weren't just sounds anymore. They were real. Across the terminal, the man finally moved. He walked toward Ethan with calm, measured steps, his expression controlled, but his eyes sharper now, more focused. "You were right," he said quietly. Ethan looked up, unsure how to respond. "I didn't know," he said softly. "I just heard him." The man studied him for a moment, then nodded once. That answer mattered more than certainty. One of his associates stepped in closer, lowering his voice. "Boss, this isn't random." The man didn't reply immediately. He didn't need to. Planes didn't just disappear. Not cleanly, not without a trace. If something had gone wrong, it had been arranged to go wrong. Quietly. Precisely. His gaze drifted back to the frozen screen, then toward the gate, then back to Ethan. The pieces were already forming in his mind. "Someone expected me to be on that plane," he said finally, more to himself than anyone else. The associate didn't argue. He just nodded, because they both understood what that meant. This wasn't failure. It was intention, carefully designed, and it had almost worked. Ethan shifted slightly in his seat. "Was it going to crash?" he asked. The man looked at him, then answered in a tone that was calm but absolute. "Yes," he said, "but not by accident." Ethan's mother stepped closer, her hand resting protectively on his shoulder now, her earlier embarrassment gone. "What is happening?" she asked, her voice unsteady. The man straightened slightly, his presence filling the space without effort. "Your son heard something important," he said. Something most people would have ignored. It wasn't praise. It was recognition. Behind him, one of his men checked his phone again, then spoke quickly. "Maintenance logs wiped this morning. No inspection record." The man's expression hardened just slightly. Clean. Too clean. And the pilot? He asked. No contact yet, the associate replied. That was enough. It confirmed what he already suspected. This wasn't an accident buried in bad luck. It was something planned, something executed with care, and meant for someone specific. Him. He looked back at Ethan, who still sat there trying to understand how something so big had come from something so small. Do you know what you did today? The man asked. Ethan shook his head. I just told you. The man exhaled softly, almost like a quiet acknowledgement. You stopped me from getting on that plane, he said. And that means you stopped something much bigger than you think. Ethan didn't respond. He couldn't. The weight of it didn't fully make sense yet, but he could feel it. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, simple card, placing it gently into Ethan's hand. If you ever hear something like that again, he said, you call this number. Ethan looked down at it, then back up. Why me? The man held his gaze for a moment. Because you listened, he said. Then he turned and walked away, his associates falling into step beside him as they disappeared into the crowd. Behind him, the airport was still unraveling over a missing plane. But for the man in the dark suit, the situation was already clear. Someone had tried to remove him without a trace. Someone had planned it down to the smallest detail. And they had only failed because an 8-year-old boy understood a sentence in a language no one else bothered to hear. By the next morning, Flight 908 was headline news, but the truth was nowhere in sight. Reporters called it a mysterious disappearance. Experts speculated about mechanical failure, and officials promised answers that would never come. Because this hadn't been an accident. It had been planned, carefully, quietly, and meant for one man who was supposed to be on that plane. In a private office high above the city, Vincent Morelli stood by the window as one of his men delivered the final update. The pilot's gone. 2 engineers too. Maintenance logs wiped clean, he said. Vincent nodded slightly. No surprise. People who set traps like that didn't leave evidence. They erased it. And the source? Vincent asked. A group trying to move in on your territory, the man replied. This was their way in. Vincent's reflection in the glass didn't change, but his eyes hardened. It would have worked. Clean. Silent. Permanent. If not for one interruption. Hours later, Ethan sat at home, the airport already feeling unreal, like something that had happened to someone else. His mother stayed close, still shaken, still replaying how easily things could have gone differently. The small card Vincent had given him rested on the table. A knock came at the door. When it opened, Vincent stood there, calm as ever. Ethan looked up immediately. You're okay, he said. Vincent gave a slight nod. Because of you. He stepped inside just long enough to place a small box next to the card. For you, he said. Ethan frowned. Why? Vincent met his eyes. Because you listened when no one else did. Ethan hesitated, then asked quietly. Are they going to try again? Vincent paused, then answered simply. No, not a guess. A fact. He turned to leave, stopping only once. If something ever feels wrong again, he said, trust it. Then he was gone. Ethan opened the box slowly. Inside was a small compass, simple, steady, always pointing the right way. He held it in his hand, understanding just a little more than before. Across the city, Vincent stepped into his car, his world already back in motion. The people behind the plan were gone. The threat was finished. But one thing stayed with him. The moment everything changed. A quiet airport. A single sentence in a language no one noticed. And a little boy who heard it and chose to speak.